Shalom, WJC family. It's Shabbat is approaching. I'm sure we could all use a good Shabbat. It's been a pretty intense week. As a matter of fact, I'm recording this video on Wednesday, the day after the election, and there is still no decision on who will be the next president. And I wanted to record this video before we know who the president is, because this goes beyond what we're about to talk about, goes beyond that particular question. The question is, who are we supposed to be in a world that doesn't make sense to us, right? No matter who you are, because this thing is so evenly split, no matter who you are, I feel like I am a minority who sees a truth and everybody else, or it seems like the majority of other people, don't see that truth. And I find it confusing and perplexing. It's hard to be in the minority. But this week in Shul, we'll read Parshat Vayera, which is all about being in the minority. Why? Because it's about Abraham and Sarah, and they, inevitably, as Jews have been almost every place we've traveled in our history, besides the Promised Land and the state of Israel itself, have been a minority. So we're good at this. And the question is, what is the job of a righteous minority? And by the way, everyone thinks they're the righteous minority, right? So this doesn't matter who you voted for or what your particular most important values are. The question is, when you feel like the world isn't making sense, like you don't understand how people can be thinking how they're thinking, what is our job? And does Judaism have any wisdom for us? And the answer is yes. And the answer is that even a very slim minority who is, to use the words of the Torah, righteous or innocent, is crucial. How do we know? So this Torah portion is full of great stories. At the beginning, we have Abraham and Sarah, right, greeting guests hospitably in the desert, and they turn out to be three angels. So much so, it says Abraham's talking to God, and then he actually steps away to greet the angels. It's so important, or he thinks they're people, to greet these messengers. And then we have the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and finally the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac that we read on Rosh Hashanah. So this is great stories. I want to zoom in to start on the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Right? Very famously, God decides to check with Abraham before destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. And he comes to Abraham, he says, you know what, this place, Sodom, it's awful. These people are so violent, I need to destroy it completely. And Abraham pipes up and he says, are there 50 righteous people there? And then 40, 30, 10. Each time God says no, there's not even that many righteous people there. But the protest is so interesting. Right. If there's 50 righteous people there, God, you can't destroy stone, says Abraham. What good are 50 righteous people among thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of residents of Stone or any place else? What impact could 50 righteous people have? And yet God doesn't say, who cares, Abraham, about 50 righteous people? God says, you have a good point. That would be a problem if I did that. But don't worry, because there's not 50 righteous people. And all the way down to 10, even 10 righteous people. And God never says, Abraham, what are you talking about? 10 righteous, innocent people among a city of the worst kind of violent people and evil and awful people. 10 people don't matter. They are a drop in a giant bucket. God doesn't say that. God says, Abraham, you have a point, but there's not even 10 people. There's Lot and his family, and I'll take them out. Right? 4 people before the destruction. But what good are these? Is this few people, right? Innocent, righteous people in a violent world. It seems that God and Abraham both think that they are incredibly worthwhile, that they have a role to play, and that indeed it would be the wrong thing, even God trying to do it, right? It would be unjust to write off the whole society of Sodom and Gomorrah and destroy them if it would mean ignoring 50 righteous people. I thought about that. I reflected on our own situation. Right? We are way more than 50. We are nearly evenly divided. And if everyone can just respond to this moment the way Abraham responds, by fighting for what's good, what he sees as good, what God teaches him is good, what the Torah teaches him is righteous and good. If we could all respond that way, we would be okay. I don't care who you voted for. Which brings us back to the story of Abraham being hospitable at the entrance to his tent. Right? Why can Abraham leave God and have a conversation with these passerby? There's all kinds of different explanations. The Talmud tells us that actually that Abraham does exactly the right thing. Right? The Talmud tells us that welcoming guests is greater than welcoming the presence of the Shekhinah, because of Abraham's example in our Parsha. But why? It seems the only explanation can be is that there's no difference. Right? Interacting with God in an esoteric way is the same as interacting with people in a real way and doing good and righteousness by them. Say by being hospitable, by reaching out to our neighbors, because they are made B'Tselem Elohim. By the way, I don't care what their yard sign said. They're still made B'Tselem Elohim. And when we look at our neighbors and we see the face of God instead of the face of the other, that is doing righteousness. And so that's the connection between the story of this hospitality and the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The sin of Sodom and Gomorrah is that they have no appreciation for their neighbors. They no longer care for them even one iota. They can't see any holiness, any righteousness, anything worthwhile. Abraham, on the other hand, looks at people, whether he knows them or not, whether he knows their political views or not, where they're from, who they are, their race, their nationality. He sees God and goes to serve them. Beautiful example. As Shai Held in his collection of commentary makes a great comment. He says, if Sodom is characterized by tza'akah, right? God says, I need to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because of the tza'akah, the great outcry that comes to me. Like the whole world is screaming from the violence of that place. So if Sodom is characterized by tza'akah, this outcry of evil and violence, Abraham and his descendants must evince tzedakah, righteousness. So I love that wordplay, right? And it's our question. Are we going to be representatives of tza'akah, adding more violence to the world, or are we going to be representatives of tzedakah, adding righteousness to the world, love, service to our neighbors, making our neighborhoods better places, worrying more about what's going on outside our windows than what's going on in our Facebook feed? That's tzedakah. Tzedakah is when we look at our fellow neighbors, the people we live near, the people who maybe need our support. And there's so much need right now. And we see in them, like Abraham, the face of God. And we turn in this moment to service, to bring more righteousness into the world, to bring more goodness into the world. That has ever been our role. And we, the Jewish people, have lived in some pretty awful places. This is not one of them. America is still a beautiful place for us. We still enjoy freedoms that we have appreciated for so long, and yes, we should fight and protest to protect those freedoms. But more important than that, maybe even, and you can quibble with me on that, and that's fine, is to just put love into our neighborhoods and our communities and start mending the wounds of this terribly divided period of time. We do that by addressing the many needs that are out there. And I hope, starting with this Shabbat, we can all move forward, working towards that goodness, being the righteous. Hopefully, you feel like you're in a righteous majority, but I think all of us feel like we're in a minority right now. But that doesn't make our role any less important or any less worthwhile. May we all have fortitude, strength, peace, and partnership in fulfilling that mission of our people, the mission of tzedakah.